Anyone found guilty of violating the quarantine regulations will be fined 10,000 rupees or will be sentenced to 6 months in prison. A retired military officer to probe deforestation. Police obstruct Namal Karunaratne during an inspection tour at the demolished King's Assembly Hall in Kurunegala. Former Minister Rishad Bathiuddin files a writ application with the Court of Appeal seeking an order to prevent his arrest. What was discussed over the phone by SIS director and former president a few minutes before the April 21st attacks.
Good evening, I'm Sandra Ferdinando. Let's start off with a look at your local news. Health Minister Pavitra Baniyarachi has signed the extraordinary gazette containing the new quarantine regulations. Now, according to the gazette, anyone found guilty of violating the quarantine regulations will be fined a maximum penalty of 10,000 rupees or will be sentenced to 6 months in prison.
රටේ ජනතාවගේ සෞඛ්‍ය තත්ත්වය ආරක්ෂා කිරීම.
The safety of the public is the government's priority, and this is why we have decided to gazette certain health guidelines as laws. Accordingly, anyone entering business establishments or public areas should wear a face mask and practice social distancing. Anyone found guilty of violating these regulations will be fined a maximum penalty of 10,000 rupees and or will be sentenced to 6 months in prison. Regulations that must be followed by businesses and other entities are also included in this gazette. In addition, the gazette would further strengthen the existing laws with regard to restrictions on movement, quarantine processes and transport.
ආරණා සම්බන්ධයෙන් මෙතෙක් පැවති නීති තවදුරටත් ශක්තිමත් කිරීමත් මෙම ගැසට් පත්‍රය මගින් සිදු වෙනවා.
Another 49 individuals have tested positive for COVID-19 in the Minuwangoda cluster today. Army Commander Lieutenant General Shavendra Silva, who heads the National Operations Center for the Prevention of COVID-19 outbreaks, said that 13 patients were identified from quarantine centers. The other patients were individuals who had come into contact with them. Accordingly, the number of COVID-19 patients in the Minuwangoda cluster has risen to 1,770. Meanwhile, Sri Lanka's COVID-19 tally now stands at 5,219. The Health Ministry said that 1,826 COVID-19 patients are currently receiving treatment.
COVID-19 patients were identified from 21 districts in the country by this afternoon. The districts from which patients have not been identified include Vaunia, Trincomalee, Kilinochchi and Mullaitivu. The Colombo district holds the highest number of COVID-19 patients who are receiving treatment at present. As at 4 p.m. today, the epidemiology unit statistics showed that 1,720 employees at the garment factory in Minuwangoda had tested positive for the virus.
The situation in the Gampaha district today. A quarantine curfew was imposed in the Katunaga police jurisdiction since 5 a.m. today. In addition, a curfew is also in effect across 18 police jurisdictions in the country. PCR tests were carried out on 42 children at the Pallevala market after a grade 10 student at the Bandaranaike Mahavidyalaya in Mirigama had tested positive for the virus. 17,875 PCR tests were carried out in the Gampaha district by 8 a.m. today. Accordingly, Gampaha Regional Health Director Dr. Miharayappa said that 1,387 individuals had tested positive for the virus. Among the infected cases, 71 were identified from the Katunaika export processing zone. 36 individuals who tested positive for the virus from the Sidua, Katana, Nigambo and the Katunaika export processing zone yesterday were directed for treatment by the Office of the Medical Officer of Health in Sidua. The Board of Investment said that the Navy is carrying out monitoring activities at the Katunaika Free Trade Zone. Its Director General Sanjay Mohotala said that the activities at the zone are taking place in keeping with health and security guidelines. Why were restrictions imposed at the Colombo Municipal Council building? Entering the Colombo Municipal Council and one of its buildings in Maradana was restricted after an officer at the Public Assistance Department tested positive for COVID-19.
PCR tests have shown that a management assistant had tested positive for COVID-19. Accordingly, all colleagues of the employee at the department have been subjected to self-quarantine. This is the first patient whom we have identified by carrying out random tests. However, since we need to confirm it, we hope to conduct PCR tests again and send them for testing. The Standing Committee on Finance of the Colombo Municipal Council convened a meeting yesterday. The Mayor, the Municipal Commissioner, heads of departments and the members of the committee had attended the meeting. PCR tests will be carried out on them tomorrow.
Why
were some stores at the Manning Market in Petta closed? 23 shops at the Manning Market in Petta have been closed after the husband of a COVID-19 patient had engaged in business at the market. 36 individuals who are believed to have come into contact with the trader were subjected to PCR tests today.
We are requesting consumers to abide by the health directives when visiting the market.
PCR tests were also carried out on bus drivers and their assistants at the Gunasinghapura bus stand today.
We will be conducting PCR tests on the associates of patients who identified from the areas falling under the Colombo Municipal Council. A patient has been identified near the Colombo Manning Market. In addition, a patient was also detected from the Colombo Municipal Council. 75 individuals who came into contact with this individual were subjected to PCR tests. A patient was identified in Union Place as well. We conducted PCR tests on 64 of his associates.
The situation at the Colombo National Hospital. The number of patients visiting clinics at the Colombo National Hospital has been restricted in a bid to curb the transmission of COVID-19.
Some employees at the Colombo National Hospital have tested positive for COVID-19. They have been directed for treatment. Individuals who came into contact with them have been directed to quarantine centers. We have not found evidence to suggest that the virus has been transmitted between individuals at the hospital. Since we need to reduce the number of people visiting hospitals, we have implemented a mechanism to deliver medicine to the homes of patients registered with clinics who are not required to visit the hospital. The number of visitors entering the hospital has been restricted to reduce the number of people gathering at hospitals. Patients registered with clinics at the Colombo National Hospital can use their clinic cards to obtain medicine at the divisional hospitals.
PCR tests were carried out on 124 individuals at the Lanka Sabha school in Mortumulla after a woman who attended a wedding had tested positive for the virus.
What is the situation in 14 hospitals that have been allocated to treat COVID-19 patients amidst the surge in cases? According to the National Operations Center for the Prevention of COVID-19 Outbreak, most of the patients were receiving treatment at the Kambarugamu Hospital in Matara as at 5 a.m. today. The figure stood at 226. Among them, 210 were employees at the Brandix factory, while 16 patients were contacts of these workers. The Kambarugamu Hospital has surpassed its existing capacity by 26 patients. The Neville Fernando Teaching Hospital in Malabe holds the highest capacity of treating COVID-19 patients and is treating 172 patients at present. The hospital is capable of treating 228 additional patients as well. The Hambantota District General Hospital is currently treating 166 patients. It is capable of treating 20 additional patients. Meanwhile, the National Institute of Infectious Diseases in Angoda is treating 158 patients at present. Among them, 94 are employees attached to the Brandix factory, while 21 are close contacts of them. The facility is currently treating 38 more patients than its capacity. According to the statistics of the National Operations Center for the Prevention of COVID-19, the Valikanda Base Hospital, Iranavilla Hospital, Teldenia Hospital and Kartankudi Hospital are treating patients above their capacity. That figure stands at 89.
අපි තරයේ විශ්වාස කරනවා තවමත් මේ
වරත් COVID
We are confident that the transmission of COVID-19 has not reached the community stage. Epidemiology experts and specialists studying the disease have pointed out that the virulence of the virus in the new wave of COVID-19 is higher than what it was during the previous wave. We have allocated 14 hospitals for the treatment of COVID-19 patients. There are vacant beds at these hospitals. Therefore, there is no need to have fear about the facilities at hospitals. The Health Ministry has made arrangements to allocate the required amount of beds for COVID-19 patients based on the capacity in the country.
ඉන්ගේ ප්‍රතිකාර සඳහා අවශ්‍ය පමණට ඇඳම් වෙන් කිරීමේ හැකියාව සෞඛ්‍ය අමාත්‍යාංශය සූදානම් කරලා තිබෙනවා.
We looked into the welfare of the locals in areas where curfew is still in effect. Newsfirst correspondents who toured these areas said businessmen, traders and self-employed individuals have been severely inconvenienced due to the prevailing situation. This is Gane Mulla.
අපි අන්ත අසරණ වෙලා ඉන්නේ. අපි ඇත්තටම කියනවා නම් දැන් පාරට බහින්න වෙලා තියෙන බලට හොයාගන්න කණ්ඩ.
It is hard to live, but what can we do? Some come to buy beetle from me at times. We buy tea and sugar to survive.
It's been 4 days since the products were brought in. The leeks, tomatoes and other vegetables are rotting. We had to throw more than half of the stock.
The locals of this village that provides shelter to approximately 50 families earn a living by farming and daily wage employment.
During the previous lockdown, we had jackfruits to eat. But this season, the jackfruits have not ripened. The price of coconut is too high. We are finding it hard economically. We have no other mode of income than working as daily wage laborers. We have no paddy fields or tea estates. So how can we live?
During the previous lockdown, we were given the 5,000 rupee allowance. Everyone says you can purchase food and essential items from Satosa, but we have no money to purchase anything.
The district secretary of Gampaha has requested the finance ministry to disburse funds amounting to rupees 361,725,000 to grant relief to families affected by the COVID-19 pandemic in the Minuwangoda, Dulapitiya, Attanagalla and Mirigama areas in the Gampaha district. In a letter to the finance ministry, the district secretary had requested the finance ministry to issue a directive to provide the 5,000 rupee allowance among the affected families with the assistance of the Department of Samudra Development as it has been carried out during the initial outbreak of the virus in the country. He pointed out that 72,345 families have been affected due to the COVID-19 pandemic in the district. Upon inquiries made by Newsfirst, the Finance Ministry confirmed that it had received the letter sent by the district secretary. There are approximately 60 entities operating in the Katunayaka trade zone, which employs nearly 50,000 individuals. There are another 30 entities operating in the Biyagama trade zone, which employs approximately 30,000 employees. There are 5 investment zones operating in the Gampaha district. Given the prevailing crisis, some of these entities have been closed down. We urge the authorities to ensure the safety of the employees attached to these trade zones. Government must intervene and protect their jobs and support the entities to provide them with their salaries and other benefits.
The All Ceylon General Ports Workers Union has warned that the failure of the Sri Lanka Ports Authority to abide by proper security and health protocols concerning shipping operations will increase the risk of COVID-19 entering the country. In a letter to Army Commander Lieutenant General Shavendra Silva, who heads the National Operations Centre for the COVID-19 outbreak, the union pointed out that workers directly and indirectly involved in shipping operations are not carrying out their duties in a secure manner. The union added that allowing local and foreign crew members to leave the vessel and the lack of a proper internal mechanism to address these matters has aggravated this issue. Meanwhile, the Development Officers Service Union has requested authorities to provide sufficient personal protective gear for state employees to carry out their duties amidst the COVID-19 pandemic. The union added that development officers attached to divisional secretariats in the Gampaha district have received instructions to report information on COVID-19 patients. Accordingly, the union has written to the Secretary to the Ministry of Provincial Councils to take steps to purchase personal protection equipment to individuals such as development officers who are involved in essential services under the operational cost of those institutions.
මේ පිළිබඳ විද්‍යාත්මකව පරීක්ෂණ කරන ක්‍රම.
The testing policy must be disclosed accurately. Yesterday, we discussed the importance of updating the testing policy to suit the latest developments. We might have the capacity to conduct 5,000 tests. However, due to various factors, we might fail to reach this capacity. Taking into account the prevailing situation in the country, we must increase our testing capacity to at least 10,000 per day.
කරන ධාරිතාවකට මේ වර්ධනය කරගන්න ඕනේ.
ලෝක සෞඛ්‍ය සංවිධානය අනුමාන කරනවා.
According to the World Health Organization, 1 in every 10 people in the world are either infected with COVID-19 or carrying the virus. We have not mapped our patients as yet. We have not yet mapped the cluster either. We can only identify patients or carriers if we carry out sufficient testing. We can only curb the spread of the virus if the patients or carriers are isolated.
අපිට පාලනය කරගන්න පුළුවන් වෙන්නේ.
Latest innovations that can be used in the treatment of COVID-19 patients were donated to state hospitals at the Nipunatha Pesa building today. The donation had taken place under the patronage of State Minister Dr. Sita Arambepola. We donated the equipment to the Valisara Hospital and the Gampaha Hospital. Our ministry and the Inventors Commission hope to upgrade these innovations through this institution and then distribute them among the hospitals after manufacturing them. The President once invited us to attend a meeting of the Presidential Task Force. I participated in that. However, I did not receive an invitation to attend meetings after that. I feel that the Health Minister and the relevant entities are taking action in this regard. If I am given a chance to contribute towards that, I will make use of that opportunity.
We question as to why the government cannot place high-risk areas under lockdown even for a short period. It seems that the 20th Amendment is more important than COVID-19. They are trying to suppress public criticism against the 20th Amendment. Religious leaders, civil activists and members of their own party are speaking against the 20th Amendment. We as the opposition cannot take this matter to the streets due to the COVID-19 situation in the country. Therefore, the government is of the stance that this is a good opportunity to fulfill their agenda and bring in the 20th Amendment to replace the 19th Amendment. It is clear that the government is preoccupied with the constitutional amendment. We urge the government to focus more on curbing the spread of the virus rather than the 20th Amendment.
The task force of the National Operations Centre for Prevention of COVID-19 outbreak has taken action to reject a proposal shared by a private businessman to repatriate 2,000 Sri Lankans stranded in the Middle East due to the high cost involved in the operation. The Daily Mirror reports that the company has requested $2 million or approximately 380 million rupees to bring the group to Sri Lanka on a ship with hospital facilities. The Daily Mirror further reported that the task force of the National Operations Centre for Prevention of COVID-19 has rejected this proposal. According to the newspaper, the NOC PCO has revealed that it would cost around 180 million rupees to bring the group by air. Meanwhile, we have also received the letter containing this proposal sent by the relevant business entity.
Meanwhile, a donation of Rs 50,000 was granted to 40 Keovils at temple trees today in line with the Navaratri Puja festival. The donation was made by Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa.
The donations were handed over to the Kovil custodians who were present at temple trees today. During the event, Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa pointed out that Sri Lanka and the entire international community are facing a severe crisis due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Despite such challenges, the Prime Minister stressed that it is everyone's responsibility to protect the values of Hinduism.
A tense situation arose opposite the historic King's Assembly Hall in Kurunegala that was at the centre of controversy after being demolished recently. The police had not permitted a group including Namal Konaratna, a member of the Janata Vimukti Peramuna, and some Buddhist monks from inspecting the facility, citing a court order.
කඩලා අදට මාස 3ක් ගත වෙනවා. ඒකට අපේ පොලිසිය ආධාර ක්‍රියාමාර්ග අනුගමනය තියෙනවා. මේ කෝට් එකේ නියෝගයක් දීලා තියෙනවා අපිට අත්අඩංගුවට ගන්න එපා කියලා අධිකරණයේ නියෝගය අඩු යනවා. රජයේ තීන්දුවක් දෙනවා.
Another group that arrived at the location demanded Namal Kanaratne and his group to leave the area. Namal Kanaratne expressed these views at the Atkande Rajamaha Vihara following the incident. The henchmen of Minister Johnston and the mayor caused obstructions to us. However, we are not disturbed by those incidents since they happen to us all the time. The committee that submitted its report to the Prime Minister has issued recommendations. The first recommendation is to reconstruct this facility that has been demolished. The rainy season has begun. Therefore, this construction is being battered by the weather. The remaining section in this construction is also facing the risk of being destroyed. Therefore, we request the government to pay attention to this matter. Police have launched an investigation into allegations of an assault during an arrest in the Mirihana police area.
It is reported that this incident had occurred on the 5th of this month. The group that experienced the situation held a media briefing today.
Two people in civil attire got off a scooter and asked for my ID. I asked them who they were and if they are with the police. I shall hand over my ID. One individual asked who I am to ask them for their ID or if they are with the police. Then he asked the other person to bring the pole which was inside the scooter and started assaulting me. I ran to my friend's house. After 5 minutes, my friends and their siblings came. The two who were in civil attire called another bike with 2 more people. They then informed that they are from the police. When they went to the police station and lodged a complaint, the sub-inspector there refused to accept our complaint. Then the two who were in civil attire came with a pole and hid in the police station. The Mirihana Police Crimes OIC, Karl Veerasinghe, came there and with 5 others who were in civil attire. They did not ask me any question. They held me from my neck and assaulted me and went towards the person who was recording. They asked who he was to record clips inside the police and grabbed the mobile phone from us and assaulted those who came to save him. The 8 of us were put inside a room in the police station and were assaulted by around 15 people. The sub-inspector was asked to ring the emergency bell. Once the emergency bell was rung, around 20 individuals came running into the police station while shouting. Around 40 individuals beat us up. They beat us after putting us into a cell. They took us away on a truck. Karl Veerasinghe, who held a pistol in his hand, threatened to kill us. We were taken to the Vellavatta police. They then took us to the JMO. He was at an apartment in Vellavatta. We were given a dirty mask to wear in turns. My friend and I were produced in courts while the others were released on bail. When I was speaking to my son, an officer came and grabbed me by my neck. He tried to shove me into the cell. He then grabbed my mobile phone. Afterwards, he hit my back and then started dragging me by my neck. I then said that I am a doctor, but he completely neglected it. He dragged me by my neck and pushed me outside. We have shifted the investigation from the purview of the Mirihana police to a senior superintendent in the Mount Lavinia police. Accordingly, SSP Rohan Premaratne is investigating this. The investigation is underway.
Former Minister Rishad Batudin filed a writ application with the Court of Appeal today seeking an order to prevent his arrest.
The acting IGP and director of the Criminal Investigations Department are among the respondents mentioned in the petition. The former minister is charged with criminal misappropriation of public funds and violation of election laws with regard to the transportation of IDPs in CTB buses from IDP camps to Mena to vote at the 2019 presidential election. The petitioner pointed out measures were taken to transport 12,000 IDPs who were in camps in Puttalam to the areas of their permanent residency to exercise their franchise after obtaining approval from then Finance Minister Mangala Samaravira. The petitioner said the CID's attempt to arrest him on the instructions of the Attorney General are unjustified. Rishad Badiuddin requested for an interim injunction order preventing his arrest until a final decision is given following the examination of the petition. Meanwhile, Attorney General Dappula de Oliveira today summoned the Deputy Inspector General of Police in charge of the Criminal Investigations Department, Prasad Ranasinghe, to inquire over the delay in arresting former Minister Rishad Badiuddin. State Counsel Nishara Jairatna, the coordinating officer to the Attorney General, said the Attorney General had advised Sri Lanka Police to operate in a manner that protects the rule of law. She said that the Attorney General advised the CID to operate in a manner that ensures the public has faith in Sri Lanka Police, adding the officer must not disregard the advice of the Attorney General and the orders given by the courts. The DIG in charge of the CID was instructed to ensure those who assist those who are wanted by the court to go into hiding are taken into custody, and the Attorney General stressed, I quote, justice delayed is justice denied, in court.
President Maithripala Sirisena has vehemently opposed claims that he was informed about warnings of a terrorist attack before travelling overseas. He made these remarks at the Presidential Commission probing last year's April 21st attacks.
Former President Maithripala Sirisena gave evidence at the Presidential Commission for the third time yesterday. During the sitting, an additional Solicitor General who led the evidence cited reports showing that the then State Intelligence Service Director Nilantha Jayawardena had contacted former President Maithripala Sirisena on multiple occasions between the 4th and 16th of April last year before the President had travelled overseas. Accordingly, the additional Solicitor General questioned the former President whether he was informed about the foreign intelligence warnings of the attacks that were received on the 4th of April on any of these occasions. In response, the former President said the then State Intelligence Service Director Nilantha Jayawardena had not informed him about the matter. Former President Sirisena said the failure of the State Intelligence Service Director to inform the President of such intelligence information is a serious flaw, since definite instructions were given to appraise him on all intelligence matters. The additional Solicitor General then questioned the witness whether the then SIS Director had contacted him through the President's Paget Road residence when he was in Singapore. In response, the former President said the SIS Director had contacted and informed him about the explosions in the country and the massive damage it has caused in the country. However, the additional Solicitor General pointed out that the phone call had been made before the bombings and questioned how the SIS Director could have informed the then President of an explosion. In response, the former President said he did not recall receiving a phone call in the morning since he was hospitalized in Singapore at the time. He also pointed out there is a difference in time between Singapore and Sri Lanka. Producing a report to the Commission, the additional Solicitor General pointed out, according to local time, the phone call had been made before the explosions had taken place in the country. The witness then said he could not recall the matter. Citing there was no unfavorable situation in the country to appoint an acting defense minister when going overseas, the former president said he could be contacted anytime using the latest modes of technology. Accordingly, the Commission questioned the former president on why an officer from responsible security units such as the State Intelligence Service could not contact him despite the existence of advanced technology. The witness responded by saying that he had been hospitalized on the 20th and 21st of April last year and that even his private security personnel were not allowed to stay close to him. The former president rejected claims that he had offered a diplomatic posting to the former IGP if he had accepted responsibility for failing to prevent the attacks. He pointed out that investigations carried out on the attacks with the support of foreign intelligence units did not suggest that the IS terrorist group had direct or any connection to the bombings. The additional Solicitor General then questioned the witness on the statement made by former Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe, stating that everyone must be collectively responsible for the April 21st attacks. In response, the former president said that the officers who failed to prevent the attacks, despite having the chance to do so, must be held responsible, for the attacks. The Commission questioned the witness on the arrest of 4 individuals over the recovery of a massive haul of explosives in Wanatha Villuwa on the 16th of January last year under the Prevention of Terrorism Act, among which 2 had been released even before 3 months. The former president said if such an incident had taken place, the person who directed the release should be held responsible for that matter. However, the Commission pointed out that it was the former president who had signed the release papers of the suspects. The witness then said that he had signed several documents presented to him by the Criminal Investigations Department and the Ministry of Defence, and that he was not able to peruse the contents of each and every document individually. When the Commission questioned former President Maithripala Sirisena on his responsibility regarding the incidents that occurred in the lead-up to the bombings, he said that police chief and deputy police chiefs were not required if that is the case. He pointed out the Defence Secretary, the Inspector General of Police, the commanders of the armed forces and the intelligence units must ensure that they fulfill their duties and responsibilities.
Meanwhile, the cess levy on imported apparels have been increased less than a week after the government released import restrictions on the product.
According to a directive issued by the Trade Ministry, the cess levy imposed on imported apparels would be hiked with effect from the 14th of October for the first time since November 2017. Accordingly, the levy on 11 categories of products including male and female garments, swimwear and tracksuits has been hiked from 200 rupees to 450 rupees a unit. Meanwhile, the cess on 5 categories of apparel products ranging from bed linen, babies garments and kitchen linen has also been increased from 150 rupees to 200 rupees a unit. A letter issued by the Import and Export Control Department showed that the import ban on apparels that were imposed to promote local industries and curb currency outflows amidst the COVID-19 pandemic was lifted on the 9th of October.
And now on to an update from the capital markets. The Colombo Stock Exchange posted a turnover of more than 3 billion rupees for the 4th day this week.
The Colombo Stock Exchange gained 0.51% with 29.87 basis points to close at 5,920, while the S&P SR 20 gained 0.82% with 19.31 basis points to close at 2,366.14. The Colombo Stock Exchange recorded a daily turnover of 3.46 billion rupees.
Today we had a high level of interest in the mid-cap counters and blue-chip counters. If you take the turnover levels, again we are seeing high level of turnover and trades taking place. Turnover has exceeded 3 billion again. In line with that, we are seeing number of transactions also exceeding 31,000. We are starting to see high level of retail activity continuing during today as well.
The weekly Treasury Bill auction yesterday was fully subscribed for the first time in 5 weeks. The 40 billion rupee Treasury Bill offering received bids worth 79.244 billion rupees, 1.98 times the offered value.
We are starting to see yields easing across the yield curve, and that had a major impact on the Treasury Bill auction that was held yesterday. For the first time in 5 weeks, we've seen the full amount being accepted by the central bank. To take the most important 1-year benchmark auction was accepted at the same rate at 4.99%, and bulk of the 40 billion was accepted in the 1-year category.
The central bank has printed 142.08 billion rupees since the 30th of September this year.
The Institute of Policy Studies, in their 2020 edition of the State of the Economy, forecasts that an economic contraction in 2020 seems almost inevitable for Sri Lanka. However, a sharp V-shaped recovery thereafter is very real possibility.
The Institute of Policy Studies hosted a webinar this evening in conjunction with the release of their annual flagship report, Sri Lanka State of the Economy 2020. The challenges Sri Lanka is currently facing amidst the prevailing economic and health crisis in the country were the focus of today's discussion.
number one priority, one that is discussed almost every day, is the country's public debt situation. That is not something that crept up on us overnight. It has been building up progressively over the last decade. It's unfortunate that a shock like COVID-19 simply makes matters challenging. Because of this large debt overhang, we are not able to implement an economic mitigation or economic stimulus package of a size that perhaps would have been preferred by the government given the scale and complexity of the current crisis. We have to look at the tax and spending policies to put our public finances in shape. Otherwise, we are not going to build back better, because each time a shock of this nature hits us, we are going to be, it's one step forward and two steps backwards. We have taken on debt that leaves us exposed to shocks for the next decade. And that means we need to look at how we can show up foreign reserves, not borrowed, but non-borrowed foreign reserves.
What was Sri Lanka's position in terms of inequality before COVID-19, and how has it exacerbated inequalities in Sri Lanka and in terms of the economy?
The inequality, I think, exacerbated quite a bit. As you very correctly said, the poor and the vulnerable are more affected by the pandemic. If you look at the response in Sri Lanka, it was 0.25% of GDP. But if you compare that with even low middle income countries like Vietnam, where the relief package was 3.6% of GDP, or even Indonesia, which has 7% of GDP, and even upper middle income countries. Thailand had 9.6% of GDP. So this is where that what we have done, I feel, is not enough. It's quite comprehensive. It included price controls and transfers given to the most vulnerable, and relief on loan payments, and all of these. But what was lacking was the size of it. Now, what happens is when it is not enough, people go to different types of coping mechanisms. They might run down their savings, or they might sell their assets. And most importantly, they might not invest in education and health, which could have quite long-term impact on human development of the country. So it is why it is very important at this particular juncture, because consumption is down, investments are low, trade is not happening. Only thing that could stimulate growth is government expenditure.
The Ministry of Environment has introduced a new hotline to lodge complaints about incidents of environmental damage. This was mentioned during a media briefing today by the Ministry of Environment, Mahinda Amarveera. We have introduced several hotlines to inform the Ministry about incidents that cause damage to the environment. You can contact the Ministry of Environment on 1991, Central Environmental Authority on 1981, Geological Survey and Mines Bureau 1921. If the matter is not looked into, I urge the public to contact me personally and inform me about it. I am also planning to appoint a retired major from the army to overlook operations when conducting raids. We are currently in the selection process and the appointment will be made soon. This officer will be instructed to look into any activity which harms the environment. The People's Movement to Defeat Violence has expressed regret over the undemocratic decisions that are being made by the government by ignoring the people's mandate. Issuing a statement, the movement said it had been established to defeat the government's undemocratic campaign to pass the 20th Amendment.
In its statement, the movement pointed out that it is the responsibility of the entire community to protect the democratic social framework in the country. The statement noted that it is the civil organizations that created awareness about the detrimental effects of the 20th Amendment and the need to protect the independence of commissions and the 19th Amendment. The movement said that its objective is to bring together various religious, cultural and political groups onto one platform to resolve the problems of the people. Venerable Ulapani Sumangala Thero is the convener of the movement that comprises former governors, President's Council Maitri Gunaratna and Kirti Tennakon, Attorney at Law Gunaratna Vaninayaka, Professor Anura Uthmange, Vasanta Dharmasiri, Mayuri Senanayaka, Attorney at Law Rajika Kodituaku, Anand Palita, Aruna Ruwanbella, Vimal Jayasuriya and Palita Vikramaratna.
Over the years, many people have voiced their opinion on the pros and cons of democracy. We found a clip that speaks about the topic and why it is important to make an informed decision at the election rather than picking someone from a list. We leave you tonight with this clip. Good night.